I have 2 books at my bedside, Lieutenant. The Marine Corps Code of Conduct and the King James Bible.
I hate snakes, Chuck! I hate them! And may the Christian Lord guide my hand against a Roman popery!
And they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
We're on a mission from God.
Entitled, you want answers!
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
Maybe we should chug on over to Mamby-Pamby land, where maybe we can find some self-confidence for you, you jackwagon!
Coming to you live from his padded cell high atop Bethel Church, the most heralded, the most despised talk show in all of human history. This is the talk show hell hates. This is Pastor Mike Online.
And here we come. Coming to you live from our top secret broadcasting bunker here at Area 52. Just running just a little bit late. This is Pastor Mike and I'm online and I'm live with you today. Glad that you could be with us today and join with us today. I feel nostalgic today. We're going to go back and take another look at probably one of the most to me one of the most interesting subjects in the Bible, and apparently to a lot of you out there, because you've talked to me and told me, I'll ask people, how did you find us, or how did you get in touch with our ministry or whatever, and people said they were looking for various things. In a lot of cases, they were looking for giants. And did giants actually live on this earth? Is it possible that there were a race of beings that lived on this earth that were gigantic in size? And I don't mean like 6'8", 6'9", because that's in my family, that's common. My dad was 6'7", and let's see here. And yesterday, I was kind of just real melancholy yesterday. Yesterday, my dad would have been 82 years old. It was his birthday, July 5th, right after July 4th. And I just got to missing him real bad. I wanted him back. But I believe he's in heaven, and he doesn't want to come back. He wants me up there and everybody else. But anyway, my dad was 6'7". I'm running around 6'3". I've got my sister is about 6 feet tall. Her 2 boys are about 6'10", 6'11", somewhere around in there. And of course, my son is about 6'2", 6'3-ish, somewhere around in there. So we're big fellas, okay? We're just big men. And so I'm not talking about that kind of giant. I'm talking about a giant that if you saw it, you would say, that's a giant. No doubt about it. That's a big sucker. Okay? And so the question is it all just mythology? Is it all, and one of my favorite stories, what really got me going on this was, I think even before Mom started taking us to church, my favorite story was Jack and the Beanstalk. And I remember there was a cartoon that was made of that. I don't remember if it was like Daffy Duck or something like that, or Bugs Bunny, or both of them, or whatever. But, that I can remember parts of that cartoon. Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. And then, trying to read things in the school library that had to do with giants. And they were mainly just fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales and so on. Then to find out, when we started going to church, that King David fought a giant by the name of Goliath, that really got my interest. And I think that one of the neat things about the Bible that, at least for me, that keeps me interested in it and makes it to where I want to read the Bible, I want to find out if these things are so or not, is these stories about giants, dragons, unicorns, fiery, flying serpents, chariots that come down out of the sky that are fiery chariots. That means they're like lit up, and, they're like, people are going, oh, that's bright, and picks up a man and takes him up into the heavens. I think stories like that. I think stories like, Moses stretching his rod across the Red Sea. It doesn't just make Cecil D. DeMille a great storyline to work with. It makes the Bible interesting. It's unlike any other book in the world because you have these amazing stories in them. It's almost like the Bible was the first comic book. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that as children, Paul said to Timothy that from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures. And I can just see Timothy going through the Scriptures looking for stories about giants and looking for stories about, flying dragons and things like that, capturing his imagination. And so to me, that's what's kept the Bible in my mind and in my heart one of the most interesting book ever, because I don't just read these stories and go, wow, that would be so cool if it were true. I read the stories and I say, that is absolutely amazing because it is true. And so let's look at giants today, and let's just automatically assume that the Bible is not exaggerating in some way, that the Bible is not making something up, but that the Bible is actually telling the truth when it talks about men of great stature, men who are as tall as cedars, men whose height is extraordinarily higher than most men, and the stories of how these giants were kings of the land and how God's people, God's little people. I mean, let's be honest. When's the last time you saw a really tall Jewish basketball player? And there goes Schmiggy Epstein up for the layup. He barely has to jump. He's 7'3" tall, just lays it in. You just don't hear stories of tall Jewish men playing basketball. So you have the little guys against the big guys. Let me put a picture up on the screen for you. This is, I believe it's in South Africa. and it was discovered several years ago, and it is up on a hillside, embedded in stone, and it contains the impression of a giant footprint. You will notice down, you'll notice down, let me get a pen here. Down here, there is a guy's foot. He's standing up. So his foot up against this foot, and this foot, some people, you know how archaeologists are, well, this can't be real because there are no such things as giants, so therefore it can't be real. And they say that this was actually carved into the rock wall here with bronze chisels and so on. However, let's assume that prior to the days of Noah, that this rocky formation here was actually mud, and it was laying straight down. And a giant comes, he's walking down the road, and he steps in this, and it pushes up the mud that's underneath his feet. The mud that's underneath his feet does not support the weight of his feet or his body. So as he steps down, it pushes up and out the sides of it, the mud mixture, all right? And that's what you have. You have it here. You have it here. You have it, look at it here. Look at these toes. It's pushed up where his toes were. And there is evidence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I think like right here might be a 6th toe, but I'm not sure about that. But you have other places in the world where there are giant and so how did that get that way? How was it that it was sitting down at one point and now it's pushed up? Well, we know from the Bible, Genesis chapter 7, that the fountains of the great deep opened up, pushed the dirt up and back. And we also know then that as billions and billions and billions and billions of gallons or liters or whatever you want to use of water is building up on the earth's surface, that the weight of that water pressing down on and pressing minerals into this mud would solidify it, petrify it, turn it into a stone, probably in a matter of days, rather than, well, now we know that it takes 6.5 million years to make a... No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You have all these these dead things that are killed in the flood, and instead of laying in the bottom of the water and rotting over the course of, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks, they don't get a chance to rot. The pressure of the water pressing calcium, pressing other minerals down into the flesh of that fossil turning it into a stone in a rapid manner, turning it into a stone before it has a chance to rot away, and thus you have fossils. Billions of dead things buried underwater, turned into stone by the sheer volume and the pressure of the water on top of that, turning it into a stone almost within hours of it being laid down, and you have this all over the earth, including fossilized men, fossilized dinosaurs, fossilized, you name this, fossilized that. It's all over the world. We have stories all throughout history. King Arthur fighting a giant. Was that story real, and could it have been real? If you believe the Bible, the answer, of course, is yes. In Hindu mythology, you had the Daityas. These were giants, and they were not nice people. They were, let's just say that they loved fricasseed humans for supper, okay? Greek mythology, you have the Gigantes, were the offspring of Tartarus and Gaia. Now, think about what that means. Tartarus is a god. He is a spirit. Gaia is the woman of this earth, or she is this earth herself. The spirit of the pit and the spirit of the earth. Okay? So that's where, according to Greek mythology, that's where the giants came from. Of course, my favorite story again. In English, it's Jack and the Beanstalk. In French, it's Jacques and the Beanstalk. All right? And of course, you know that Jack buys some seeds from a guy, trades in his cow, the last cow, they're starving to death, trades in his cow for these magic beans. His dad gets angry and throws them outside, or his mother does, and all of a sudden this big, gigantic vine grows up all the way to the sky, and you know the rest of the story. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman, be he alive or be he dead. I'll grind his stones to make my bread. There are stories around the world that these, I would say some of these giants were consumers of human flesh. And actually preferred that flesh over anything else. You have the two founders of London, England. Two giants by the name of Gog and Magog. And I can't remember what building it's in, but there are carvings of these two giants, one of them called Gog and another one called Magog, and they supposedly are the founders of London, England. And there's some that say that their spirit still reigns over London, which could possibly be true. There they are right there in the Royal Arcade. Oh, this is in Melbourne. The Royal Arcade in Melbourne, modeled on those. Okay, that Guildhall is where they are in London. These are in the Royal Arcade in Melbourne, Australia. And you have two giants, Gog and Magog. If that rings a bell, that comes right out of, let's see if I have my Pure Bible search software open. And I'm not saying that that this Gog and this Magog are the ones that are mentioned in the Bible, but we do have a mention of Gog and Magog in the book of Ezekiel. Let's see, what chapter is that? Chapter 37, I believe. No, that's the dry bones. 38. The word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog. And notice that Gog is a chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. A prince, of course, is not just a human, it's a principality, it's a spirit. And the story is that the Lord Mayor's account of Gog and Magog says that the Roman Emperor Diocletian had 33, there's that number, 33 wicked daughters. He obviously never let them get spankings, and he obviously let them listen to and watch MTV, and they watched Beavis and Butthead, and they watched all kinds of evil stories like that. But anyway, he had 33 wicked daughters. He found 33 husbands for them to curb their wicked ways. They chafed at this, and under the leadership of the eldest sister, Alba, they murdered their husbands. For this crime, they were set adrift at sea. They washed ashore on a windswept island, which they named Albion, after Alba. And here they coupled with demons. Check that out. They mated with evil angels. Is that possible? Yes, according to 1 Corinthians 10. They coupled with demons and gave birth to a race of giants whose descendants included Gog and Magog. Now, practically every civilization in the world has a common story or has similar stories concerning giants. Practically every one. Every civilization has dragon stories and dragon myths and so on. And we know then where those stories come from. They're not just the product of overactive imaginations. They're not just the product of some of the high priests getting a hold of some peyote or cannabis or opium or anything like that and having visions of these evil, nasty creatures. We know, according to the Bible, if you believe the narrative of the Bible as it lays out the history of the entire world from the beginning of the creation until, I would say at least until this very moment, but even beyond that. But if you believe that the Bible contains the entire story of man, I think this is important. Then you believe that there were creatures on this earth that science says did not exist, could not have existed, never existed, and we find no evidence that they ever existed, which is not quite true. But you'll find that you have stories of indigenous groups all over the world who had encounters with brontosauruses, stegosauruses, different types of dinosaurs. I have a niece, my sister's granddaughter, that she could recite for you every kind of dinosaur that there is. If she was here, man, I would put her on the show and say, man, let's go. Give me every kind of dinosaur that ever lived. Why? Because she studied this all her life. But they all have stories of dragons. They all have stories, or some kind of story that the world was destroyed with a worldwide flood. Now, some people say that it was limited or whatever, but practically every civilization has a universal flood story. So they believe it. And then practically every organization, every group, every culture, every ancient historian has some story about giants and about how they lived, about how they were seen, about how they were viewed. In some cases, the giants were defeated and they had to take over being the gatekeepers. I don't know why they didn't use them in their army, but anyway, they used them as gatekeepers and so on. But they had stories of giants that they used to help protect their city. And so, and I love to do this when I go talking in different places. I say, I love God's people because you're the only people in the entire world who actually believe that there were giants, dragons, and unicorns. And I get, in some places, I get a really good laugh out of that. And some places, they go, and I'm going, what? You don't believe there were dragons? You don't believe that the devil is a dragon? You don't believe that... Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. What, you don't believe in Goliath? That he was a giant? 6 cubits and a span? That's bigger than you are. That's not 6 feet and an inch. That's 6 cubits and a span. Oh, yeah. And then I talk about unicorns. The Bible says that God has the strength of a unicorn. Does God have make-believe strength from a make-believe animal? Well, no. Then there really was unicorns on the earth. Elasmothium sibericum is one of them. And then I go in to talk about that and so on, and they go, oh, okay. So do you believe in giants, dragons, and unicorns? And they go, yeah. Some people just don't want to be embarrassed. It's and I run into the same thing when I bring up UFOs. Start out the talk, who in here believes in UFOs? Who has ever seen a UFO? I may get one hand raised. when I go through the information that I have, and I ask, now, who in here thinks they've seen a UFO? There's a lot more hands usually at the end than there are at the beginning. There is such a stigma on believing these things. And yet the Bible, listen people, the Bible is a supernatural book. It tells us things that are not seen. It tells us things that nobody else wants to believe in and yet are true. And you would be wise to want to believe in these things. So here's right out of the chute. God is going to describe, before he talks about dragons, before he talks about life after death, before he talks about any of that, he goes right into the giants issue. So in Genesis 6, verse 4, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of, what does that say? Men of renown. And that means that people all over the world all knew that there was something that lived in the woods, something they were told not to mess with. And so what does somebody do? He makes himself a tent. He's going to go out in the woods, and he's going to see whether or not these giants are real or not. And it won't take him long living in those days to find out whether or not those giants are real, because they were men of renown. As men sat around fireplaces, or they went into, I'm using the word pub as like a traveler's place of rest. Travelers would come in, they would go to a public house, or a tavern, which is the first cousin to tabernacle, and they would sleep there for the night. And while they were roasting around the fire and warming up, they were sitting there and they were telling stories of giants, and stories of dragons, and stories of unicorns, and how they could be defeated, and so on and so on, as if these people knew exactly what they were and what they were talking about. Moses, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, knew of them firsthand. Moses knew of them. He knew that there were dragons. He didn't have to bend down to somebody and, hey, psst, what do you want? Well, I'm trying to write this thing about these large men-looking thing that are 3 and 4 and 5 times taller than the average man. But I'll be honest with you, I've never seen anything like that. I don't know if it exists or not. Can you help me out? I think Moses knew it. I think he knew it. First occurrence of after the flood, the time of Abraham and Job. In Genesis 14:1, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations. I believe these men were, I believe that they were giants on the earth. We have Nimrod. Now, Nimrod is an interesting character to me. And because of this, let's put Genesis 10 up on the screen. There are things written that indicate that Nimrod was a giant, or another name for Nimrod was Demuzid. I think that's what his name was, Demuzid. So here's Nimrod, and the Bible says this is his beginning now. And the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Phut, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Seba, and Havilah, and Sabta, and Reama, and Sabtika, and the sons of Reama, Sheba and Dedan. And Cush begat Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one in the earth. Now, what Genesis 6 said was there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, the same came, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. So you have, back in Genesis 10, the sons of, let's see where we got, verse 8, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, wherefore it is said, even Nimrod as the mighty hunter before the Lord in the land of Shinar. Now we know that Nimrod's kingdom was Asher and Nineveh, Rehoboth and Calneh, and we also know that he was responsible for building the town called Babel. Now, if Nimrod was in fact a giant, how did he get to be that way? You see my problem? Whenever I see men in the Bible, and especially when it gives their lineage, we know that Cush was a direct descendant of Ham, and we know that Ham was a direct descendant of Noah. So far, we don't have anything in the Bible that says that Cush or Ham or Noah, for that matter, who gave birth to Ham, Ham gave birth to Cush, Cush gave birth to Nimrod. We don't have anything in the Bible telling us that Ham is anything other than a human being. We just don't have that. Now, there is a possibility, and I'm not sure if I believe it. I just don't know. We know, because this is what some people have asked me when it comes to giants. How did giants survive the flood and still be there after the flood? Well, That's just plain text scripture, because in Genesis chapter 6, it says, "And there began to be giants on the earth, men of renown," and that the event of the angels mating with the human women took place before the flood. And the Bible says, and also after that, meaning after the flood. When the giants saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, all of them, they took them wives, all of which they chose. And so we know the event took place once before the flood. We know that it took place once after the flood. And so it would be that that Ham and his offspring, Canaan and so on, probably portions of the offspring of these particular people were giants made by angels who performed the same act after the flood as they did the first before the flood. That still leaves us with the question, and somebody sent me a text. I wonder if they I wonder if they have an answer to it. And some people are saying my sugar is dropping. I happen to have, guess what? Some emergency medication, and it's called hogwash. Ta-da! So I'll try it and see. There, that's better. Anyway, how did, if the story's true that Nimrod is a giant, the only way I can see possible is that Cush, even possibly Ham, but Cush, let's see, Nimrod was the son of, okay, he was the son of Cush, is that Cush married a woman who had the genetics in her of a giant. In other words, a giant mated somehow, a giant mated somehow into the family of Ham. One of the offspring of that was a giant, and then Cush married this woman who was a giant, although, it's unlikely that she was like 30 feet tall. But Cush took this woman to be a wife of his, and who was also of the giants and had the giant genetics in her. And it might have been, what do they call a recessant trait, that it was in the DNA, but it wasn't, it wasn't going to manifest itself in that person. But then when Nimrod receives it, bada boom, bada bing, he's a giant. Okay? And that's about the only thing that makes sense to me, is that it had to have happened that way or something else. I'd be more than glad to welcome your theories if you have one. But there's Nimrod there. And, of course, in this painting, he certainly looks like a giant. So Genesis 10, that's what we were looking at. And Cush begat Nimrod. Possibly Cush's wife had giant DNA in her. And he began to be a mighty one in the earth. And he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Out of that land went forth Asher, and builded Nineveh, and the city Rehoboth, and Calah, and Resen, between Nineveh and Calah, the same as a great city. And Mizraim begat Ludim, and Anamim, and Lehabim, and Nephtuhim, and Pathrusim, and Casluhim, out of whom came Philistim and Caphtorim. So now we have the Philistines here too. And the Philistines are the perpetual enemies of God's people always. Never was a time when the Philistines were friends with the Israelites. Now, if I were to take this for a while and preach it as like a sermon illustration, the Philistines represent this lost world. And they're always trying to conquer us. There are elements and groups in this country that do not want us around. They don't want us to live. They don't want us to survive. They definitely don't want us to vote. I can say that on YouTube, can't I? They don't want us to vote. I didn't say anything else about voting, but they definitely don't want us to vote. You know, this hogwash stuff, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. If someone asks you what you did today, you can tell them, look, I got a great big dose of hogwash from Mike Hoggard. All right. Anyway, the Philistines. The Philistines also represent, let's take that up a notch. They represent spiritual realm. Principalities and powers and rulers of darkness and spiritual wickedness in high places. In 1 Samuel 17, you have the Philistines. You have the Philistines in the land of Judah, and the Philistines don't belong to the land of Judah because the land of Judah doesn't belong to Philistines. The Philistines in the land of Judah, and you have the Judah people there, and they have no power. Listen to this now. They have absolutely no power to get the Philistines off their land, out of their houses, away from their children. Nothing. They have no power against them. The Philistines have succeeded so well. Here I was going to talk about giants, but the Philistines have succeeded so well in overcoming God's people. Let's say that's us in this illustration. That the Philistines forbid any of the Jews to be an ironsmith or a blacksmith. Meaning that if the Jews wanted swords, they couldn't get them. If the Jews wanted spears, the Philistines weren't going to make them for them. The only blacksmith allowed in all the land of Judah had to be owned and run by a Philistine. And you just ponder that for a while. And that means that if the Jews needed some of their farm tools sharpened, their goads, their axes, well, they could go and get some of that done, but they couldn't sharpen their spears, couldn't sharpen their swords, couldn't do anything like that. And the reason was given, this is 1 Samuel 13, that in case any war broke out, and it was a war against the Philistines, they did not want the Jews to be able to fight in this war alongside whoever was fighting against the Philistines. They made that plain and simple. And folks, I am 100% against any kind of gun control in this country. 100% against it. I don't want you to try to lecture me on guns and how evil they are. The only thing evil about guns are the people who carry them. And that's it. And I will not apologize for that. But anyway, that's who the Philistines represent. The Philistines represent the spiritual realm that is always trying to dominate us. They're trying to conquer us. They're trying to destroy us, so on and so on. And their champion, of course, is Goliath. They love, the Philistines ain't dumb. They know if you want a chance to win, you've got to get you a giant on your team. Okay? Now, Nimrod was the 13th in line from Adam. 13. That number means something. What, let's see what I can come up with here. Since Nimrod was 13 from Adam, what would that signify? Since Nimrod was the builder of Babel. How many words in the name of Babel? Mystery. Babylon, the great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. 13 words. Okay? He was the sixth son of Cush. He's got sixes on him. He was the mighty one. Genesis 6. I do. I think Nimrod was the builder of these things here, the pyramids. I believe that not only do those represent the high places that are mentioned in the Bible, but I think their purpose has everything to do with joining heaven and earth together. Because after all, isn't that how the giants came to be to begin with? That's how they came to be, was that the forces of heaven, or the second heaven, the outer space, and those that dwell there came and mated with human women, joined with them, and created a hybrid race. How many movies have that in there? Let's see here. Starman. How about Star Trek? Who is Spock? Spock is a hybrid of Sarek, who was an alien from outer space who came and mated with a human woman and created basically the pretty much the most famous character of the entire Star Trek series. Spock is in practically all of them in somehow, some way. Why? Because he represents the joining together of space and humanity. What else? What other kind of movies had aliens mingling themselves with the seed of men by way of humans? Let's see here. Trying to think. I can't. If you think of some, you let me know. All right? But anyway, that's what that tower represents. Let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven. And I don't think it was just going to stop after it got so tall. They said, boy, look at what we did. We breached the heavens. No, I think they were going for the second heaven with that building is what I think they were trying to do. So Genesis 14, we have a story of in the 14th year that came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth and Kirnaim and the Zumzims and Ham and the Emims in Shava and Kiriathaim and the Horites and their Mount Seir unto Ephraim, which is by the wilderness. You have what looks like earthly people or earthly tribes joining with people up in a mountain. Anytime you have somebody in a mountaintop represents the heavens. Israel. Oh, yeah, this is where it gets good. And I have a theory now, a new understanding of the number 12. And I want you to bear with me on this because I think it's highly significant. I really do. The number 12, the first major place that it shows up is, of course, in this story here, we're going to send 12 spies into the promised land. Now, the real promised land is not on the earth. The real promised land is in heaven. It's a land that floweth with milk and honey. It's a land where God dwells, and it's a land that there's a war over on who's going to live on this land. So, Pastor Mike, are you saying that the true Canaan land is up in space somewhere? No. I think the true promised land is far above space. It's far above the second heaven. It's in the third heaven. and it's where God dwells. If you look at heavenly Jerusalem, you see 12s all over it. Do this on your own. You see 12s all over it. And I think that that's what it represents. Do you remember the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind? Remember that movie? Steven Spielberg, even though he wrote the screenplay for it, even though he directed it, even though he produced it, Steven Spielberg did not get his ideas made up in his head. Spielberg had ideas given to him in the way of stories that he was told actually happened. And if you remember, if you've ever seen it, and if not, I encourage you, get a copy of this and watch it, 30, 40 times, take notes. Because you're going to pick up on some things. You're going to find out that the aliens, when they are coming through the earth, they're picking random people to make their way up Devil's Tower, the opposite of the mountain of God. They make their way to the Devil's Tower, and we find out that even though all of them have been chosen separately, chosen from separate places of the world, that they've all been picked, and the exact number of them is 12. And it comes, I believe, from a book that undoubtedly Spielberg read. I read the book. I can't remember what it was named, but it was sort of like this guy. He was a Jewish author, and he was a proponent of the idea that that God really was a space alien. And God, the space alien, was, looking for a way to contact man. And this story of God meeting Moses and man at Mount Sinai was basically the alien's way of encountering human beings. Now, this guy was I think it was an Anglican priest, Church of England guy. How he didn't get defrocked over this, I have no idea. So I'm reading this book, and it occurs to me that there is a scene in Close Encounters of the Third Kind where they're in the living room of the house, Roy Neary's house, and the mom's telling the kids, come on, it's way late, it's time to go to bed. One of the kids grabs the television and says, but Mom, Dad said we could watch the 10 Commandments. And the movie The 10 Commandments is about the 12 tribes on their way to Mount Sinai to meet God. And I'm just going, oh my goodness. So anyway, it just so happens that the aliens pick 12 random people, and they all want them to go to Devil's Tower. That's the opposite of God picking his 12 tribes and having them meet him at the mountain of God, which is Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. Instead of the mountain of sin or the mountain of Devil's Tower, it's the opposite of the mountain of God. And I'm watching this and I'm just going, there's got to be more to this. And the more I watched it, the more I really took note. The government, on top of all of that, has picked 12 people, specially trained scientists, biologists, anthropologists, you name it, all these different science. And the government has 12 people assigned to go onto the mothership to go up to the home planet of the aliens. Meanwhile, the aliens have picked out 12 of their own. And one of them is the character Roy Neary, who in the movie, when they ask what his birth date is, he says, I can't remember exactly what he said, something like 1944. Well, the movie came out in 1977. So how old was Neary? He's 33 years old. And I'm just like, I can't believe this. Did Spielberg do all this on his own? No, I believe spirits guided him and had him write all of these things down as he's putting this movie together. Bottom line is the aliens only pick one out of the 12 because the other 12 humans that the aliens picked, they couldn't go for various reasons, but Neary gets to go, the main character, and they show just a little bit of inside of the mothership, and then they go off into space and so on. But it's the idea that 12 people were supposed to go and meet, quote unquote, the UFO God, or wherever, the UFO chief monster or whatever he is. That's what they were trying to, and to me, the similarities, they're there, all right? I know I've spent a lot of time on that part of it as well. What time is it? Yeah, I'm going to have to cut it off. But anyway, Israel's encounter with these giants, with the gods of these giants and so on. It can be seen in movies, it can be seen in books, it can be seen in scripts, commercials, symbolisms, and so on. And we don't have time to get into all of that today. But it's real. And giants were real. And I have not seen, here's what's evident. I have not seen any evidence that every single giant who was carrying this DNA of these evil angels, and we might get into that Monday. I cannot see any evidence in the scriptures that every single one of them was wiped out. Now, if you know of a scripture that you read it and it says, well, Pastor Mike, it clearly says here that this happened, I would love to see that. Send that at pastormikeonline@gmail.com, and I will look for that. But if there are still people in this world who are carrying the genetics of the evil angels that invaded this earth, raised up giants on the earth, and are still getting away with it, and those people are still around, I wonder what that means for the future of planet Earth. Got to run. It's fun to be with you today. Hope I left some questions in your mind, something to think about, something that maybe that we can pick back up on Monday. Come be with us Sunday as we worship the Lord and preach the Word of God. I'm going to ask you to pray for our ministry. And I hate to even say why, because it's just sort of a thing that I have that I don't mention things like this. But our offerings are way down. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's the economy. I don't know if people have lost their job or what. But our offerings are way down, and we're going to try to feed the tribe that our dedicated elder that we named as an honorary elder of Bethel Church. We're gonna try to feed him and a few hundred people that are in his community and go to his church. But for the first time in years, I'm going to ask you, would you seriously pray about supporting our ministry on a regular basis, if you would? Okay? I really would appreciate that. All right? I know that God has everything in his hand, and but we still have a lot of work to do. And I'd like to see that work done before the Lord comes. So help us out if you can. All right? This is Pastor Mike. I love you. God bless you. There's some sickness going around in our church. I'm starting to feel it, I think, here. So pray that I don't get it. All right? And thanks for the hogwash. We'll see ya.